please stand up and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good afternoon, folks. Good evening. My name is Bill Garcia, Chairman of the Board of Weld County Commissioners, and thank you very much for coming to this special meeting. Thanks for coming to this special meeting to receive public comment on the statehood question. And what I'd like to do first is to give you the agenda of what we're going to be doing here, tell you about our public comment process. It'll be the same process that we have when we get together for our Weld County Commissioners meetings up there in Greeley, if you've ever been to one of our 9 a.m. meetings. If you haven't, we invite you to come anytime you have a question or comment about Weld County government. Please come on up at public comment at 9 a.m. on Mondays and Wednesdays up in Greeley. Love to have you, and we're very happy to have you here. Very happy to be hosted by Fort Lupton to be here. So the rules of comment are, I'm going to pass around this attendance list. This is really not for attendance. If you want to put down, if you're going to be speaking, if you'd put your name down and fill that out for us, that way we can, I'll start you right here, sir. So if you want to be down as being on record as being a participant, that's great. If you intend to speak, please put your name down there. Happy to have you. What we'll be doing is we will start off with a brief introduction of the topic and the issues and I'll open up to my fellow commissioners to discuss briefly some of these comments. Rather than providing a PowerPoint and going into a long dissertation with you, we're here to hear from you. So we would like to hear from you, so we're going to reserve the bulk of this discussion. Is this amplifying? Oh, okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't work.
So anyway, we're going to be having commentary from you, and that's why we're here. This meeting is scheduled from 5:30 to 7:30. We will be providing the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes on this topic or any topic that's not on the agenda. You will note that on the door I have very professionally handmade a sign that may help you to put together some of your thoughts on this topic of the statehood and the disconnect. I'll go through that. These are some things that may help you in putting your thoughts together. These would certainly help the Board of County Commissioners in thinking about this topic. Is there a disconnect? Is there a disconnect between rural and urban issues and feelings? Is there a disconnect between Denver in terms of the political center and the outside parts of the state, outside of that Denver metro area? So our first question would be, is there a disconnect? And leave that for you to fill in whether there is or not. If so, should anything be done about that? Or is it okay that if there is a disconnect, is it okay? Number 3, should the Board of County Commissioners put a question that asks about the statehood topic? Should we put that on the ballot for all of Weld County voters to vote on? So if you'd tell us about that. Number 4, if that's not the way to go, are there any other ideas that you might have? Help us out. This is an opportunity for us to hear from you, not just for us to put something on the ballot and tell you is choice A or B. Give us some other ideas if you have some other ideas. We're open to that, and we've been listening to your ideas as you sent them on the emails and your phone calls. So at this time, I would open it up to my fellow commissioners to frame the discussion, and then we'll open it up to the public.
Sure.
Commissioner Rademacher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Doug Rademacher. I'm County Commissioner. Obviously, I represent the southwest part of the county, so Tri-Town areas, Milliken, Meade, Johnstown, in that area there. Been a county commissioner for 7.5 years, so I have about 1.5 years left in office. So this goes back to me more than just this last session. This goes back to me the last 8 years almost, that this disconnect has really been growing between basically the urban and the rural parts of the state. And it's just not Colorado. I think this pain is being felt across the breadbasket of America, but it just kind of flashpoint right here, and the snowball got pushed off the hill, and we're on top of it. And frankly, it's getting bigger as it's growing. This originally started off as a 7-county, and I think it's going to grow much bigger before it's all said and done. And in fact, we've had our neighboring states having counties. Please bring this with you. Ask them to come along with us. So my background is I'm a 4th-generation farmer and rancher. We still farm just a little bit southwest of here, or I should say northwest of here. We farm about 1,200 acres, so we've been here a long time. Weld County resident, Weld County native. When I see what's happening with the disconnect as far as the rural and the urban folk, you got to remember we're probably about 3 or 4 generations now away from the farm where people are making these laws, have really no idea what it takes to grow a crop and produce livestock. And yet they're making rules and regulations that affect my lifestyle. It's happened over and over again. And one of the main critical parts of my operations is water. And the fact that they're making rules on water, once again, that directly affects my livelihood. And I can give you an example. We've been fighting now for almost 30 years to get a simple water project approved in northern Colorado. And we can't even get our own governor and state senators to support this. It's things like this that just drive me absolutely crazy. So I'm here to say I'm all for this. I think we will probably put this on the ballot, and it will give us a temperature on where to go from here. So with that, I'll let Commissioner Freeman say a few words, and Sean will have the floor.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Freeman. I'm the County Commissioner for District 1, which is the north part of the county, from Greeley all the way to the state line north and then out eastward. So I represent towns like Windsor and Eaton and Ault, Grover, New Raymer. Actually, I'm the new guy on the block. I've been a county commissioner for 6 months. So, yeah. But my background.
Welcome aboard, Mike.
Yes, thank you. My background is a lot like Doug's. I'm a 4th-generation farm and ranch up west of Ault. I still live on the place that my great-grandparents homesteaded up there in the early 1900s. So my background is also agriculture. I've also, my wife and I also own J9 Crop Insurance Agency up in Ault. So that's what we did in our real job after I left the family farm back in 2001 and joined her. And so our business is completely around agriculture. That's all we deal with is crop insurance. So along the Front Range as well as across the state of Colorado. We have insurance on the western slope as well as in Nebraska and Kansas. Part of my other background is I was a school board member for 8 years up at Highland, and I was also 2005 CASB president. And so education is something that also comes to the table here. And when I look at the amount of money and the amount of impact that oil and gas has had on Weld County and northeastern Colorado, as well as agriculture, and I see the tremendous amount of property taxes that we're putting into the state of Colorado. 41% of your property taxes go to K-12 education, and yet we're not seeing any additional money coming back to any of us in education. We're also seeing tremendous cuts at the higher ed level. All of these things are things that the impact, the economic impact that we're having in northeastern Colorado is not coming back to us. It's not coming back to you all that are putting this money in. And we just don't think that it's right. We don't feel that we're being represented fairly. We think that that's going down there and it's staying there. It's true on a number of other issues, transportation and some other things. But I'm gonna stop there and let Commissioner Conlon talk about some of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Freeman. I'm going to be brief because we're here to hear from you tonight. I'm sorry? Turn the mic. Oh, turn the mic. How's that? Is that better? Super, thank you. As I was saying, I'm going to be brief because we want to hear your input tonight. Contrary to what you may have read or heard, we're here tonight because Weld County citizens approached us. They came forward in our normal meeting process over the concerns and frustration that was developing during this past session and said, please start thinking about what we can do to essentially try to become listened to down at the state capitol. And this idea came to us. As we researched this idea, we learned that 5 of our current states, 1/10 of our country's states, have gone through this process. And if you go back and look at why some of those states looked at breaking away from their original political subdivision, it was many of the concerns that I think have been voiced here by Commissioner Rademacher, Commissioner Freeman, in terms of a disconnect. People felt disenfranchised. They felt their concerns weren't being listened to. And sometimes, you kind of have to rattle a cage to get people's attention. And so what we're here tonight is to kind of discuss. Hopefully there's some ideas out there. There's some dialogue out there in terms of this. I believe this discussion is a very important discussion, not just to have here in Colorado, but nationwide. I think there are other states, the interest that's been given to us by counties in Nebraska and Kansas. Other counties across the state of Colorado have contacted us from western Colorado and southern Colorado and other parts of eastern Colorado saying, hey, we share your same frustrations. We share your same concerns. So I think this is a very important dialogue to have. I think it will hopefully allow us maybe to better communicate with our folks in Denver who, as Commissioner Rademacher has said, we're basically an urbanized society right now. We're 2, 3, 4 generations removed from the family farm, the family ranch. I grew up on a family ranch over in western Colorado. I'm a 3rd generation Colorado, and I love Colorado. But I have seen changes happen, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years in this state, that concern me. And I think that if we don't begin to have this dialogue, I think it's going to lead to greater problems. I think people, when they feel disenfranchised, when they feel that their voices are not being heard, I think that's a problem in a representative form of government. And so what we're doing is following through on what our citizens, residents in Weld County asked us to do. Go back, look at this as a potential idea. There are other ideas out there, which I know we'll discuss tonight in terms.
You want to bring them up?
And we can bring them up as we go along. We want to have a dialogue. But I'm here tonight to hear from you. I think you've read and heard enough from us over the last month to 6 weeks. We want to hear your comments, where you think we ought to go as a county on this. There are other counties that are looking at this just in the same way. We learned this week that one of the counties has already voted. Their Board of County Commissioners have voted. Cheyenne County voted this week to put this on the ballot for November for their residents in Cheyenne County to vote on it. There are other counties, Yuma County and others, that have said if citizens come to us and petition us to put this on the ballot, it will be on the ballot. And that's why we're here tonight. We want to hear your feedback. Is this something that you want to talk about, you want to have as a discussionary point for this fall's election? In terms of things. So with that, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kirkmeyer will be joining us later. We had a very important meeting in Leadville today where we had a very important transportation grant up before the Department of Local Affairs. She's representing us over there and is driving back from Leadville, and she will hopefully get here before the end of the evening, so you'll have all 5 county commissioners here to engage. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And if anyone has any questions about process and all of that, don't worry about that. Just about. If anyone has any questions about process, I've got some information here. You probably don't want an hour-long legal discussion about the process, but if you do, you can come and see me, and I'd be happy to share legalisms with you. The other item that to bring up is that the Phillips County, we had 2 meetings with the commissioners of our sister counties to the east of us. And in those 2 meetings, another idea came up, not aside from forming a new state. And that was something presented by Phillips County, and that was to do a constitutional amendment to the state of Colorado that would amend the Constitution to make either the state Senate or the state House of Representatives, state General Assembly, to have one representative or senator from each of the 64 counties to kind of mirror what we have at the U.S. Congress, where each, in the Senate, each state has 2 senators.
Regardless of population.
Regardless of population. So that was something that was brought up by Phillips County as another option. So this discussion has engendered thoughts and involvement of people throughout our state, and that's why we're here today. Now, ma'am, do you want to be first to make public comment?
I don't. I just want to ask if you could say 1 or 2 things about what triggered this. What specifically? I know you mentioned water, and those are ongoing pipes. I know for generations they go on. But what are some of the other things that's causing, outside of just we can't communicate with Denver?
Very good. I will share one example. Several days before the meeting that our commissioners had with the other Eastern commissioners, I received a phone call from a financial broker in Greeley who was very upset about, at that time, pending legislation, Senate Bill 252. This is just one example. And time-wise, this might have been the last example before that meeting. And that involved increasing the percentages of renewable energies that would be utilized for power generation for our citizens, and that would have a detrimental effect on our rural co-ops. And there was not an opportunity to receive listening ears from our legislators or our governor. In fact, the Board of County Commissioners had sent a letter before that phone call from that financial broker that we need to do so, or that we wanted the governor to consider that and consider the disparate impact on our rural communities and our rural co-ops. Now, that broker ended that conversation by saying, by gosh, why don't you just call up Wyoming and see if we can get annexed into Wyoming? And I just smiled because I knew that our commissioners were going to be talking with our eastern, our friends in our sister counties, and they were going to be talking about, is this something you're hearing? Are you getting this flood of phone calls and emails from your constituents? This is just beyond the pale. So thank you, ma'am. Any other comments to that question?
No, and just to follow a little bit up on 252 and why it's so detrimental to the ag community is this 20% renewable is only put on rural Colorado. The major urban populations, the Denver, the Colorado Springs, the Fort Collins, the Longmont, the Boulders, don't have to do this. It's squarely on agriculture. It's an unfair mandate. It's totally unfair. You know, if you really want to do the renewable and have it, let everybody do it. Don't just pick and choose who's going to have to do this. Once again, agriculture does use a lot of energy, but when you have 1% of your population growing the food for the other 99%, you better have some give and take.
To answer your question, I think for me, it's been a process over the last year. And I'll start with last year. We had a devastating drought. This Board of County Commissioners engaged with the governor, in which we believed he had emergency powers to allow certain wells along the South Platte that have been shut down since 2006, that literally we had farmers that were going to have their crops, and they did, just die in the fields. And we went to the governor and we said, look, we believe under your emergency powers, the same emergency powers that allows you to take water out of high mountain reservoirs, which I agree with, to put out the Hyde Park fire, to put out the Waldo Canyon fire down in Colorado Springs. You used your emergency powers to take that water and put it to beneficial use for the public, which was to put out the fires, to protect private property, to protect the well-being of the citizens of the state of Colorado, which I agreed with. And so we said, look, we have an emergency here in Weld County. We have farm fields that are drying up. We have farmers losing their crops, and we're asking you. We sat down with our county attorney. We sat down with Central Water Conservancy District and farmers, and we put together a whole plan, and we brought it to the governor. And at the end of the day, the governor said, I just don't think I can do that. So that's where it started with me in terms of the frustration. Then I go to, this board has been very engaged in terms of the oil and gas rulemaking. 80% of the oil and gas production in the state of Colorado is coming out of Weld County. Most of that oil and gas is being produced on private land owned by agriculture, farmers and ranchers. And guess what, folks? When you have a one-size-fits-all rule, whether it's a 500-foot setback or any other type of rule, which takes away the decision-making process from the farmer and the oil and gas company, so it doesn't impact his agricultural operation in terms of that. So you don't want a well in the middle of a pivot sprinkler. And so these rules would have not allowed that common sense approach here in Weld County, where most of the oil and gas is being produced, to have that agreement worked out with the surface owner, the farmer or rancher in many cases, in the oil and gas company. And who is proposing those rules? They're people who have no oil and gas production in their counties. Now, I fully respect Boulder County or Longmont or any other local entity to put in place rules that their citizens and their communities believe are important. But to pass a statewide rule, a one-size-that-fits-all rule that impacts 80% of the oil and gas production in this state, was just unfathomable to me. And so that was strike two. Strike three is Senate Bill 252. This board went down, met with the governor, we met with the Speaker of the House, we met with legislative leaders, and we said, look, Weld County's not opposed to renewable energy. We have the largest wind farm in the state of Colorado, $2 billion wind farm up near New Raymer. We produce most of the renewable energy. How many people know that Weld County produces most of the renewable energy in this state? Okay, so we're not anti-renewable energy. But what this was about was a fundamental sense of fairness. You're going to pass a renewable mandate, as Commissioner Rademacher says, on the 1% of the people that produce your food, and you're going to exempt out your constituents in the Denver area or Colorado Springs or Fort Collins. I had a conversation with a Fort Collins representative on this bill, and I said, can you explain to me, Representative, why you think it's fair to exempt out your constituents in Fort Collins, because Fort Collins has a municipal-owned utility, and they champion that they have a 10% renewable mandate. They're doing circles around the Victory Lap. But if you cross I-25 into rural Larimer County or rural Weld County, Poudre REA provides the power, but you're going to make them meet a 20%, 100% higher mandate, which is going to cost people enormous money in terms of the production of their of the food that feeds your constituents. Is there fairness in that you exempted out Xcel, that you exempted out the municipal-owned utilities, yet you're putting this on the backs of the REAs and the co-ops? She didn't even know. This is the most astonishing thing to me. In a public meeting, she didn't even know that she had voted for a bill that exempted out her municipally owned utility. I tell you, that was strike three for me. That was it for me. I'm like, to me, you can't have a dialogue with somebody, one, that doesn't understand the facts. I mean, all of it, I'm not going to say all of this. I'll be quiet.
Well, Commissioner Conway, and speaking of having a dialogue, I think we've seen.
I'll finish more. We'll have a private
there are many
conversation.
issues that we have, and so at this time we're actually going to open public comments. So, man, you want to be first? Come on up.
And that was
Okay.
the emissions.
See,
We were forced.
in order for everybody here,
Okay,
we're,
okay.
Sat at
Okay.
that board and said, we don't know why we had to come up here. Because it's
I,
already decided.
in order
we're
for
going to run this as a public comment meeting. Ma'am, if you would like to be first, if you would please come on up. Please come on up,
That
ma'am.
took care of it all.
Okay, she said emissions was yet another one. Now, rather than folks raising their hand, we're not going to recognize you for raising your hand in the audience. You need to come up to our podium, and we're going to open public comment. This is your time to come up to speak for up to 3 minutes on any topic, or this topic, or any other topic that's not on our agenda. The floor is yours. Whoever wants to be first, come on up.
Because really the problem is just speaking in a crowd like this, we can't hear you and the rest of the people cannot hear you, so.
That's why we're asking.
I apologize that we had a microphone, but we couldn't make it work, so technologically
All right.
challenged.
Prospect
but
Valley
meeting
represented
well.
here tonight.
Prospect Valley is on
Yeah?
the floor.
All right. Good afternoon.
Please state your name and your address, or at least your town.
Bob Grand, Keensburg, Colorado. I'm a newcomer. I've been here only 15 years, and you all know what that means. I also published the Lost Creek Guide, which is the largest rural paper in Weld, Morgan County. We sent it to Boulder this last issue, and it's really interesting. Weld County is the largest ag county in the state. It's the largest oil and gas county in the state, as the commissioners have said. And we're treated as if we're a backwater wash. And Bruce Sparrow had an article in the paper, which I read, which I found pretty interesting, about rural America. And rural America does a hell of a job feeding the country compared to nowhere else in the world. And we have a large part of the population that has no understanding of that. So whose responsibility is that? Do the farmers need to communicate? Do the oil and gas people need to communicate? Does our government need to understand? Farmers and oil and gas guys, and I do a restaurant paper, and chefs have a lot in common. It sounds crazy, but they tend to work very hard. They don't tend to like direction. They sometimes don't always cross their T's and dot their I's, and they're very independent. That's absolutely contrary to what many of the urban folks have grown up with in terms of responsibility of what made Colorado what it is. We got lots of folks, and I confess, I'm from New Jersey. That's where I was born and grew up. Not exactly the high plains of the western part of the state or the eastern part of the state. But what made Colorado great was the work ethic of the people who came. You know, Frederick, small town, I happen to like a restaurant there. Guy who runs it's a fourth generation Coloradoan. Family came in the early 1900s to be coal miners. We have a history of mining. We have a history of timber. We have a history of agriculture. We have all these new people who come to town who don't give any credit for that. They're more than willing to take their salaries in the government positions and the academic positions, but they're not willing to have a dialogue. Who's responsible for making that dialogue happen? I happen to have the utmost respect for our commissioners. I think they're hardworking. I think they're knowledgeable, okay? I wish I could say the same about our state representatives, because why should our commissioners have to go down and make the case to the folks in Denver? You know, we should have state representatives, state senators who should do that effectively. And quite bluntly, we don't. Whose fault is that? That's our fault. And some of us are going to work hard on the next election for that. But you've got the urban issue that we have to get those people understanding, at least to have a dialogue. You know, the comment that Sean had about the representative up in Fort Collins, I got more calls from Erie, from the Boulder section of Erie, on this paper that I've gotten in the last 3 years of doing the paper. And the answer is they don't care about rural. They don't want fracking. They don't want any of that. They want it to go away. How can you argue with that? How can you have a debate? How can you have an intellectual discussion of getting our point across? You know, one of the things that makes Coloradoans so great is they're very independent. Good morning, Ms. Kirkmeyer. These folks don't have that. They're in this, what I want to call entitlement philosophy. And it's not just a Colorado problem. And I think, that, as Commissioner Conway said earlier, this isn't a Weld County problem. This is a national problem. And as you look at the population, and you look at the demographics, and you look how the vote is going, we at some point have to figure out a way to get our point across, or at least to be able to have a dialogue and not be ignored. Because if you haven't seen anything yet over the next 5 to 10 years, and I resent the fact that, and I'll be long gone because I'm getting to be an old guy.
On that point, Mr. Grand, you've come to the end of your time. If you would like to make a closing comment, and if you wish to address any of these points briefly, I appreciate that.
I think obviously there's a disconnect. I think the urban society has no idea what the agricultural folks and oil and gas folks are all about. They're either cowboys, ranchers, or roustabouts and don't deserve to be here. We need to have the mountains and the clean air. Should anything be done? Absolutely. But I think what has to be done and I'm not saying the 51st state, but I think what has to be done is an identification of what we are and the rights to be what we are. And I think that starts with active participation in the state legislatures, not rubber stamp political folks who got elected because they vote the right way. Voting the right way is not enough. You have to provide the leadership, and we do not have that. Put statehood on the ballot? Yes, I think we should, because I think that's a strong statement. Any other ideas? We don't have enough time. Thank you for your time.
Any questions?
Thanks, Bob.
Who's next? Who's next? Come on up. And while we're doing that, while someone's coming up to speak, please hold your applause or anything like that so that we can get through everybody's comments. Because I know there are a bunch of folks here that wish to comment, so please come up.
Commissioner, do you want to?
Sure.
This is Commissioner Kirkmeyer. And welcome back. She's, as Commissioner Conway stated, she was doing the hard work for all of us, presenting on a grant, trying to get some of the tax dollars that you've paid to come back to our community.
Want to say a few words?
Do you want to say anything while we're, and anybody that wants to?
It's opening up. I'm sorry, I'm late. I came back from Leadville, got stuck in traffic. Who else wants to
who's
talk?
next?
Gentleman back
Come
there.
on up. Please come
Come
up.
on down.
People want to form a line so we can just go through.
And if you didn't sign in on that and you wish to speak, please sign in on that sign-in sheet. Where did that sign-in sheet make it to? It's still moving? Okay, good.
Okay.
Welcome.
I'm Stan Wierzeniak. I'm from Erie, Colorado. I'm on the Weld County side. And I just came tonight to find out what's going on. I don't like the emission stuff that we got that I understand. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought that emissions, we don't really have a problem in Weld County. It's the oil wells that cause the emissions, but we still have to put them on our cars because they don't want to let go of the revenue at the state level. And is that fair to Weld County? I mean, I just don't feel like we're represented, and it's hard to get enough representation when Denver kind of runs things, and so that's why I'm here tonight. That's one of the, that's not the only reason, but there's a lot of reasons. We need money coming back to our community and to us and to the people around here, and not necessarily everything go to Denver. And we're liberal. They're too liberal down there. They spend too much, and I run my house conservatively, and I think our county does too, and I think that's what we need. So that's it.
Before I ask open it up to the board to answer your question regarding emissions, did you want to speak on any of those points on the wall?
Yeah, well, I think we should put statehood on the ballot. I think it's, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I wouldn't mind living in a 51st state. I don't know how feasible that is. I'd like to think it was, and that's why we don't have just one state. We have a lot of states across the country, and it's a good. I think it's thinking out of the box. But once we get out of that box, we get on that road, it might be better than what we have today. At least we don't have to live our life like they do in Denver or other places. We can live it how we want to in rural Colorado. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Hang on, we'll get an answer to your question. Anybody want to speak to that?
I'll speak a bit, and I'm sure Commissioner and the oil and gas and the testing and the permitting that's required here within Weld County. So first of all, the county did have an issue with being with the ozone level, the 8-hour ozone level, and it started about in 2007. There are monitoring towers throughout Weld County and actually throughout the entire whole Front Range.
Stand up.
Oh, okay. Sure, why not? I've been talking all day. So, anyways, with regard to the emissions, there are towers and monitors throughout all of Weld County. And in 2007, there was an issue identified with regard to the ozone, the 8-hour ozone non-attainment area. And Weld County was identified as one. At that time, our emissions, and I'm going to cite some numbers, they may not mean a lot to you, but I'll tell you, I'll try and put it in as simple a format as possible. At that time, we were testing our towers were at 0.081, which was above the EPA standard. So the oil and gas industry was being cited as one of the main culprits. They're not the only one, but as one of the main ones. So they actually went through and spent anywhere from $35 to $40 million to put what I call catalytic converters, essentially, on all of their infrastructure within the county. It substantially reduced the issue and the problem in Weld County. So we went from 0.081, which was the standard that EPA had set at that time was 0.080. We dropped down to 0.076, and consequently, since 0.71 going on in Larimer County and in Boulder County, that increases it, but we are still well below, in Weld County, still well below the standard that is set by EPA to maintain our health, well below that. And the oil and gas industry has done their part, and I believe a lot of people do their part. You're correct in when you say that the emissions permitting is really just a way for the State Department of Revenue to get revenue. They added on FTE and they didn't want to let them go. So you're correct there.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, a couple of things. If you go to the Colorado Department of Health's webpage, we had been declining in terms of that ozone levels since 2007. And we had actually gotten down, as Commissioner Kirkmeyer says, down to 0.071 before last summer. What happened last summer? We had the Hyde Park fire, we had the Waldo Canyon fire, we had fires in Wyoming. How many of you remember the 4th of July last year when you couldn't see out your back door because of the haze and smoke? So if you go to the state webpage, you will find the last year's totals showing that we're out of attainment. But here's what happened. I sit on the North Front Range MPO, which is the lead air quality planning agency in northern Colorado. It covers Fort Collins, Greeley, Loveland, everything north of Meade. Everything south of Meade basically is in Dr. Cog. So the Tri-Town area over here. Fort Lupton is in what we call the Upper Front Range Transportation Planning District. I asked the Colorado Department of Health last fall when the numbers came out, have you done an analysis of the impact of the fires? They said no. Okay? So we worked very hard as a board, seeking the Colorado Department of Health to do a restudy. I just got the results of that study. How many days, they sample ozone from basically June 1st to September 30th, because ozone occurs most during the summer months because of the heat and other things. How many of those days did they end up going back and saying, we're going to have to redo the data on these days? Anybody have a guess? Not all of them, 30 of them. Now that's what they would admit to. I think, in my mind, we've had our Department of Health folks look at this, but here's the deal. They won't adjust the readings that they have posted on the webpage. They won't even, I tried last month to get them to just put an asterisk there, and at the asterisk at the bottom say the 30 days data is incomplete. How many of you in your job could have 1/4 of your data, because that's basically, it was a 120-day testing period, 30 days were out of, the data's not valid. How many of you are in your jobs could have that kind of failure rate and stay employed, quite frankly, or not have to resolve the problem? Here's the kicker. The way the EPA samples these, and I know I'm getting in the weeds and I apologize.
Yeah, so good stop.
The way they do this is this is important. This is important. There's a 3-year period in which you test. So what they do is you test for 3 years, and then the next year's data knocks off the farthest year out. And you roll that average. And that average determines whether you're a non-attainment area for the EPA and have to undergo certain things or not. How long do you think it will take us to get the EPA to adjust those 30 days, lower that ozone level, which will probably put us back into compliance? How many years do you think we need? 3. You're exactly right. Is this the ultimate catch-22? So you find out that the data from 2012 is not accurate. but it'll take you 3 years to change that data to make it accurate. And by the time you get that data changed, it's irrelevant because they've dropped it off and added in a new year.
And furthermore,
And I was the one that was told to be quiet.
there was a study done by the Department of Health, the State Department of Health, so it's their study. It's about this thick. So it wasn't done by the Board of County Commissioners here. State Health Department. 65 to 75% of our ozone issue comes from outside of the state of Colorado. Wow. That's their study.
Yeah.
And if you go through and read up on the audit done of the emissions testing program, there are so many flaws in it, it's ridiculous and it's embarrassing. So they should get rid of that program.
I promise this to be the last thing. How important is auto emission testing to the Colorado Department of Health? They have to have a plan because they're a non-attainment area, the metro area, and now they've included us in northern Colorado. How important is that emissions testing program to the plan that they have to submit to EPA? At the last meeting, the Colorado Department of Health informed us, North Front Range MPO, that they're not even going to put it in the SEP, which is the plan that they have to give to EPA that will allow them to get into compliance. So by their own admission, and this was the point that Commissioner Kirkmeyer, Commissioner Garcia, Rademacher, and myself, Mike wasn't on the board, he would have made that point and maybe made that point at some of the public hearings back in 2009, that we said that this is not a cause to that non-attainment. Yeah. And so what you have is exactly right. You have the legislature adding in a new area for this testing program, which isn't needed, quite frankly. It doesn't have a significant impact in terms of the ozone creation that we already know. We know the forest fires have a larger, based on their own study, has a larger impact on that. And it's so important, they're not even going to include it in their required report that they have to make in 2014 to the Environmental Protection Agency on how they're going to get the Front Range of Colorado into compliance under ozone. Yeah. That says it all to me. Right. If this auto testing is such a significant contributor. Sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Conway.
He wanted to know about emissions.
As a postscript, at those hearings, I and the rest of the public were told that Weld County vehicles produce so much emissions and bad stuff, it went up the river basin of the South Platte and made the brown cloud. Anything further, sir?
No, I just heard that the program is so expensive that I heard once, and maybe you can elaborate on that you can put those machines on the road that checks your car, and you could literally pull every car that violated over and give them a voucher for a new car, and it would be cheaper than our program.
You're right.
You're absolutely correct.
You're right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your comments, sir. Who's next? Public, the floor is yours.
I'm going to get some water. You want that?
Welcome.
There's one right there.
I go.
Thank you for coming this evening.
My name is Joellen Wethington Hoffman, and first off, I would like to commend the Weld County Commissioners on the gun support, that we need to have our rights to have a gun if we want, and I know you back that, and the criminal is not going to, it's not going to make any difference to the criminal whether we have a law or not. They're going to get the gun anyway, and we're going to be out. So I commend you, and I personally emailed every one of you on that. I thank you. The second part is I am for the disconnect to form a new state. I am third generation in farming. My mother's 85 years old, still lives on the farm, and we fight water all the time. Our pasture's burning up. Can't pump the well we have, and it's just not right. For the city, why does the city have the right to take all the water? I don't understand that. What would they do in this country if all our food had to be imported?
That's where we're going.
We are going to be in big trouble. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments? Thank you very much, ma'am. Thanks for your comments.
Thanks for coming.
Floor is yours. Come on up, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Ron Haig, my wife and I have a farm west of town here, about 4 miles. We have rented out currently. I'm a mechanic for RTD in Denver, so I cross into that big city every day. Oh, sorry. Okay. Public speaking is not my thing, obviously.
It isn't.
I believe we need a disconnect, yes. Should anything be done? I believe so. Put statehood in the ballot. I'm a little scared of it. I'm afraid that we're going to be facing litigation forever over things like water rights is one thing that hits me. I have some water rights. I may want to sell to the city someday. Can we cross and sell these water rights now out of state, if this is a different state? That's a question, maybe we need to answer. Most of the water that's going to be used in this new state is coming from the mountains in the old state. How's this going to be? I can see attorneys just having a ball over this and supporting many attorneys over this question. I'm not against forming a new state, but I think we have an awful lot of questions that we need to be answered here.
Absolutely.
And that's all I have to say.
Very good. Any comments? Thank you very much, sir. Welcome.
I'm Kenneth Miller. I'm from rural Fort Lupton, and thank you very much for coming to hear us out. And first of all, I want to say I'm very proud to be a Coloradoan, and I want to stay in the state of Colorado. I don't want to be in some other state. I've been a lifetime farmer rancher. My ancestors come to the Platteville area in the 1860s to farm and ranch. I just wanted to comment a couple times on your list here. On the disconnect, I feel that's kind of the responsibility of the citizens here, because we are the ones that elect people, and if there's a disconnect, probably it's because we're electing the ones that we feel that are not doing the right job for us at the state and legislature. Should something be done, I really would prefer you not put anything on the ballot. And if you did put a ballot question about a 51st state, I think you should maybe also put a question about how are we going to leave Weld County and form our own county down here in the south part. And I think the majority of the people in the southern part of this county probably would rather have their own county and stay with Colorado. And that's my ideas. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else wishing to give public comment? The floor is yours. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Mary Martin. I'm here with my husband Bob, and we're on the family farm, Road 37 and 10. Been there since the 40s. He's that old, I'm not. So I remember seeing a bumper sticker in the 1990s on a white pickup truck, and it said, "God grant me another oil boom, and I promise not to waste this one." Right? Well, here we are.
Mm-hmm.
So my concern is this. We're thinking in terms of trying to keep those monies here. And I would love to know more about that trail of where the money goes, because I don't know. That's part of what I hope to hear about tonight.
Sure.
But then what happens when this dries up? Because eventually it will. Okay? And secondly, I want to thank you guys in the health department for coming out and testing our wells for free, our water. We really appreciate that. We've got a comprehensive report. We know our baseline.
Great.
We have oil fields now all around our place. They're drilling underneath us, and we're worried about our water too. So those are my comments.
Thank you very much. Did you wish to say anything about those questions up there?
Me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh. I agree, and I think Bob made some really good points, which is it's incumbent upon us as farmers and ranchers to make our voices heard. And we do that through the people that we elect. We do that by being active and going to opportunities like this and speaking. I'm not sure about statehood. I don't really see that as a real advantage. I think that it would serve us better to be more proactive, to make the decision makers more accountable for the spending of the funds that are coming from our county, and trying to come up with ways to bring those dollars back. I work at the school district here in Fort Lupton. You know that old saying that says behind every successful rancher is a wife that works in town? Yeah.
I can relate.
Sorry, Andy. But, you know, I do. I really worry about that. I see DPS with really deep pockets and lots of resources for kiddos, and we have to fight for every penny that we get here. And we've got, I think, a really good superintendent that does a good job with that. But there's limits. So, yeah, that's it.
Very good, thanks.
I'll talk real quick on the oil and gas industry, because obviously I've been farming for a long time, and in fact, some of the earliest wells in Weld County were put on our property. And you're absolutely right, ma'am. At that time, they said, well, these wells might produce 10, 15 years. Well, 40 years later, they're still producing. The technology is there now that, in my opinion, with the horizontal going on now, this industry will be in this county for 50 years plus. And talking to the oil industry, because we do talk with them regularly, there are so many formations underneath us that they haven't even touched yet. They will be here a long time, you know. And I'm all for the oil and gas industry, because we are not ready for renewable energy to play an important part in our energy needs. Everything we touch has oil and gas fingerprints on it. Plastic, rubber, clothing, cosmetics, medicines. It's just unbelievable. So where I agree that someday it may dry up, I don't think it's going to be, I know it won't be in my lifetime, it won't be in my kids' lifetime, and probably won't even be in my grandchildren's lifetime. And hopefully within 75 years down the road, we will have some alternatives to fossil fuel that make sense. Hydrogen, whatever it may be. But it definitely is not here yet today.
Can I answer one of her questions? You had asked, I think you had wanted to get some information.
3 minutes.
Be a 1 minute. Count.
Okay.
You can hear. Weld County produces on the state lands that are in this, for all the state lands in the state of Colorado, Weld County produces 70% of the revenue for K through 12 education off our state lands. So we're sending all that money down. Commissioner Freeman, who used to serve on Alt Highlands School Board, can tell you. He's done the math. Commissioner, what would be the impact on our school districts in Weld County if we were able to keep some of that, just some of that revenue? We obviously state's lands, but how much would we be able to keep?
Well, you know, and that's kind of what I said at the beginning. When we look at the amount that our tax value has gone up in the last 3 years, from about $4 billion to over $7 billion in property tax valuation, and 41% of that is K-12. 41% of those property taxes are K-12 going to Denver, and where are they going after that? Because none of you have seen an increase, not $1 increase in what you've seen in K-12 education. The other part of that is the state lands money. That is the main pot over here for K-12, besides the general fund that they backfill with. As Commissioner Conway just said, 70% of that is produced from lands in Weld County. 80% of that is from our between us and our neighboring counties to the northeast. So 80% of the total state lands money in the state is from right here. We certainly aren't seeing that return, because that money is staying in the metro area. You look at the deep pockets that the school districts have, whether it's DPS or it's Cherry Creek or these school districts. So you're not getting your fair return back to K-12 where this is being produced from.
Thank you, Heather.
Mr. Hague.
Question here, the state lands money, do you really think we could form a new state to say the state lands money stays in our state though? I mean, we're going to have a big fight with the old state of Colorado, so no.
To answer your question, we'll give them their state lands. They can keep that money. Just give us the money that we're sending to Denver off the 80% of the oil that's being produced here.
They're going to want that too.
Well, they're not going to get it. Under what is being discussed here, that money would remain in that new political subdivision. And we've run some numbers, and I'll give you one example. District 6 up in Greeley, Evans area, their current per pupil, and correct me if I'm wrong on this because we went over this, about $4,700 per student. We ran the money in terms of the money that's going to the state of Colorado being produced through oil and gas. It would raise the per pupil average in Weld County District 6, which, by the way, is one of the lowest funded school districts in the state. I think the teacher from Fort Lupton would acknowledge that. We'd raise it by $4,000 per pupil to $8,700. What kind of school system, what kind of education could you provide through K through 12 students in one district? That's one district. Mike and I have been going through some of the other districts. Every district that's been in this, the rural districts and the urban districts that have been part of this discussion, substantially improved. The idea, you know, the governor made a comment on the radio station a couple of weeks ago. He said that everybody knows that the urban areas subsidize the rural areas. I got to tell you, I was stunned by that comment. And here's why. Does anybody know what the 3 largest economic drivers in the state of Colorado are? In terms, you got it. She got it right there. If you didn't hear her, it's tourism, energy, and agriculture. Okay? I don't see any farms in Denver.
Actually, she was clear. It's mining. Isn't that what you said, mining? Yeah,
Well,
it's not
that's
necessarily energy.
That's energy. That's oil and gas. That's fine. But the bottom line is, all 3 of those drivers are happening in rural Colorado. The agricultural production is happening in rural Colorado. It's not happening in the 6 metropolitan major counties. Energy production is not happening. We can give you the well map in the state of Colorado. It's not happening there. For the governor to make that statement that everybody knows that the urban areas subsidize the rural areas, when the rural areas have, as I think Mr. Grand pointed out, in terms of agriculture, energy production, and tourism. Folks may fly into Denver International Airport, but they get in a car and they drive to the ski areas. Does the governor think that Eagle County, Summit County, La Plata County, Gunnison County are urban areas of this state? Does the governor think Rocky Mountain National Park's in downtown Denver or Mesa Verdes in Arapahoe County? That disconnect, that's what we're talking about in terms of things. And for the governor to make that comment 2 weeks ago better illustrates in terms of this divide, in terms of the disconnect. Now, I'm not trying to pick on the governor. I like the governor. I like John Hickenlooper. I know I'm getting some ugly looks now. But I don't want to make this sound like we're picking on him. But that's the disconnect. He's the ultimate urbanite. He drives a Prius, lives in Lodo, and doesn't get outside of the 6 metropolitan county very much. He's been to Weld County once for a photo op at Leprino, in which, you know, he flew in and flew out.
Well, he's been around.
You know.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. And remember, we are not taking questions from the crowd. Please come up. We're here to hear your comments, and we want everyone to hear those comments. So the floor is yours. And feel free to start to make a line if several people have an idea they want to speak. Welcome.
Doug Aiden, Fort Lupton, Colorado, and I'm not a commissioner, so I can get through these really fast. Yes, yes, yes. And as far as other ideas, I think Phillips County has an excellent point that we should be considering. I agree. And we don't want Greeley to become our new Denver. And so we need to have 2 houses. One of those is elected from the counties, those qualifying counties. The counties, should there ever become a county that is both city and county, they automatically become disqualified to have a representative in the Senate, a senator in the Senate. And so that we can make sure that rural Colorado is still represented in the state legislature.
Thank you.
Very good.
And we agree.
Thank you, sir. Hello.
Hi there, how are you?
Great.
Knee replacement. My name is Elena Metro. I'm from Fort Lupton, Colorado. And, you know, you say that Hickenlooper made those comments on the radio. Did anyone call on that? How come nobody called on it? Why didn't somebody call on that and say, you know, that's not right?
Because I was in a meeting.
Well,
I would have called.
But you know, you could have called later because, you know,
I didn't know that.
I'm on probably every activist list in the country. And they ask you to call and for all these reasons. And if you don't call, then they don't know.
Yeah,
It's true.
And they get away with it. Regarding the 51st state, I'm a bit of a pioneer type of person. I kind of like the idea. Hard road to hoe, though. It's not easy. It's not easy. It would be interesting to see the counties, all the counties in the state that were interested in it, and whether we circled them, like circling the wagons. You know, whether the southwest, southeast, you know, north. It would be interesting to see that. But, you know, somehow, even though we produce all the money, we need to get control of all the money. And I'm not sure I have that answer right now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can I
Conley?
make a suggestion?
Yes.
The governor appears on the Mike Rosen show. That's where he made the comments.
Okay.
I'd encourage you the next time, I forget which day, there's a set day, you can call KOA Radio and ask.
It's got to be Tuesday.
I think it's a Tuesday, the second Tuesday, so
Okay.
I don't know what date that is. I'd really encourage those of you that might want to ask the governor why he has that impression and where he gets those statistics to call in and ask that question. I'm sure that Dave Lauer, his producer, and Mike Rosen would love to have that participation.
It's a Thursday.
Well, I happen to be on medical leave, so I have time.
Well, he's on every month, so you
Every
can
month.
call every
Okay,
month.
thanks.
You bet.
Thank you, ma'am. The floor is yours. Please come forward to give any comments you might have. We're here to hear from you.
God, we scared him that much?
No. My opinion. Sure. How about we?
We'll give Commissioner Kirkmeyer a moment to speak in just a moment. I want to hear from this gentleman. Welcome, sir.
My name's Doyle McCarthy. I'm from South. Does the landowner have the right to refuse the oil drillers from drilling on your land, setting up a rig on your land?
No. Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Or do you want to answer?
Do you have any other comments?
No, I'm asking a question.
Okay.
Okay. So the question was, does the landowner, the surface owner, have the right to require or not allow the oil and gas folks to drill on their property? And the answer is no. There are two property rights here. You have the surface rights and the mineral rights, which are subsurface. And the way it works in our state, the surface is subservient to the subsurface rights. So you have a requirement you have to accommodate them. In other words, you have to allow them to get to their property. So you cannot stop them from drilling.
Even if the surface owner doesn't own the mineral rights?
If you don't own the mineral rights, if you own the mineral rights, so therefore you own both rights, then you have some control over it.
Well, I'm trying to separate them.
But if they're separated and severed, like a lot of the mineral rights in this county are, especially in the Wattenberg field area, so there are two property rights here, and you cannot stop them from getting to their property.
So then Fort Collins cannot stop drilling under their town?
They can attempt to stop drilling under their ground, under their town. They can put moratoriums on things. That would be called a takings under our Constitution, and they would have to pay them for the property that they essentially have taken from them. So they will have to pay them if that holds. That's the Constitution, and that's our Fifth Amendment in the Constitution. The city of Greeley learned this the hard way, because back in the late 80s, they had a ban on oil and gas in the city, and they lost. It's Lundvall versus the city of Greeley. They lost their case, and they had to allow the drilling to occur.
Property rights then are the minerals plus the land?
Yes, they're both property rights.
So then,
Just like water is a property right.
Okay. If you don't own the minerals, but you own the land, you can charge the oil company for drilling on your land, setting up on your land, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Like an access fee, essentially.
Okay. Then on the, you were talking about a reservoir that was going to be drilled or placed up here the last 15 or 20 years. What reservoir are you talking about?
This is Glade.
The Glade.
Sean, do you want to go ahead and speak on that? You've been part of Glade Reservoir for...
Yeah.
Well, wait, no. You know, you take...
No, go ahead. I'm not looking to talk.
He's a talker.
Glade Reservoir is a part of the NIST program, the Northern Integrated Supply Project. And this has been going on for at least 20 years to 25 years. You have to remember, when we did the Big T, the Big Thompson project back in the 30s, it took 11 years to get permitted. 11 years. This is a simple project on the eastern slope. Don't expect us to go to the western slope and ask them for water when we can't even develop our own water on the eastern slope. They'll meet us with pitchforks and bayonets. And that is why, yes, this has been in the works now for almost 25 years. And our governor will not support it, our state senators will not support it, and basically this water goes to 15 municipalities in Weld County, and Fort Lupton is one of them. And if we don't get that project, the only water available right now in this state comes from us, ag. This will dry up at least 75,000 acres of ag ground if this project does not get approved.
Who's paying for that water?
All the participants.
Pardon?
All the participants. All the municipalities are going towards it.
Then why is the governor involved with it?
It's a federal government, but the state government actually, permitting process goes to the state and federal government. And it's really the federal government that is really the
Army
problem.
Corps of Engineers is involved in it.
Yes,
Aren't they the one
yes, and that's the
holding it up
fact
now?
is our last step we have to get through is the Corps
Aren't they
right
the one
now.
holding it up now?
Huh?
Aren't they the one holding it up now?
The study, what happened was in 2008, the Corps released their environmental study. At that particular point in time, certain groups asked the Corps to go back and study how, and it's called NIST, the Northern Integrated Supply Projects. It's a 2-reservoir project. Glade Reservoir, which is above Fort Collins, and Gailton Reservoir, which is out in Gailton, in central Weld County. And what they asked is to study all the other proposed water projects, the expansion of Halligan Seaman, which is important to Fort Collins and Greeley, and other water projects as part of that. We have been waiting since 2008 for the Corps to get that report done. I was yesterday at a joint water meeting in Denver and was told, this is good news, folks, that we're likely to get the Corps' report next summer. At that point in time, I believe, I know, hope springs eternal.
This is big for Commissioner Conway. He has stopped guaranteeing things.
Yeah, I guaranteed other things years ago. But anyway, I'm just telling you what I'm hearing.
I know.
I hope it's true.
But we're getting very close to getting that report. Once that report is issued, the Corps will do public meetings to get public input on their environmental report. I believe they will issue the permit. And then the next step, after 25 years, is to go to the Environment Protection Agency and get what is called a 404 permit, because you can't divert water from a stream without a 404 permit, any kind of stream. You have to get that from the Environmental Protection Agency. I believe at that particular point in time, it's going to be critical to have political support, the governor, our United States senators, our congressional delegation, in trying to fast-track this. One of the things we did yesterday as part of this 3 roundtable meeting in Denver, with the Metro Roundtable, the South Platte Roundtable, and the Arkansas Roundtable, was to figure out a way in which we can streamline the permitting process for these projects. I mean, it takes 40 years from the start of a project to get it completed. The last large project done in the state of Colorado was Animas Plata, that was completed in 2008. It was started in 1968, the idea of building that reservoir in southwestern Colorado near Durango to settle a long-standing Indian rights dispute. You can't, with the forecast on the SWAZI, Commissioner Rademacher's on the South Platte Roundtable with me, he's the ag rep, I'm the county rep. Our SWAZI needs, we don't need one NIST, we need 3.
At least.
3 to meet our
Forecasted needs in 30 years.
Forecasted needs. And Commissioner Rademacher's right. The Corps of Engineers' own report in 2008 said the no alternative, or no action alternative would dry up between 50 and 100 square miles of currently irrigated farmland, which would basically go down as by and dry.
Yep.
The municipalities would come north like they have been coming north. for now more than 3 decades, and they would continue to buy up some of the most productive farmland in the United States and move that water down south. In my opinion, that is an environmental disaster ready to happen. I think those of you that just saw Ken Burns' great documentary on the Dust Bowl in the 1930s and 40s, and by the way, Colorado was part of that. Any of you have been from Baca County or Prowers County down in the southeast, that southeast part of the state? They were part of that great Dust Bowl. It is unconscionable that 80 years after the Dust Bowl, we are potentially facing another man-made disaster because we can't get a permitting process done to provide our compact allocations that the state of Colorado has entitled to us. This is the first East Slope water project that I know that is supported by Western Colorado. Club 20's endorsed it. I mean, you talk about, finding peace between, the Middle East. That's the equivalent of that. Yet we can't get the governor to endorse it. We can't get our United States senators to endorse it. I'll sit down and shut up.
Mr. McCarthy, any other comments for us?
Is my 3 minutes up, or did he?
No.
Well, you only spoke for 30 seconds, so.
Okay, I have two questions. One of them is more about water. Will you be able to turn on the wells if we get a new state?
Yes.
Will you?
Okay, well, here's what we're going to do, sir. Just a moment. Sir, here's what we're going to do. Because if you ask another question, we're going to hear from the Board of County Commissioners for 10 minutes for each question. I'd like you to give us any questions you have and any other comments, especially any comments regarding these items, and then we'll answer everything at once, if that's right.
I say, them up there, why don't you kids go ahead and go after that?
Okay, now we'll answer that. Did you have a second question, sir?
Yes.
Who determines the tax rate, property tax rate?
We do.
Okay, we'll answer his question in a moment.
Sorry.
The county, then why don't you set the tax rates lower so the state doesn't get more?
Oh,
Okay.
Oh,
All right,
we'll talk
okay,
about
now
it.
we'll answer your questions there, sir.
When you do that, go through the assessed valuation.
Turn on the wells. Did you want to answer that, Sean? You started to answer that?
Yeah, to answer your question, if you have a new state, you have that issue that is no longer under the jurisdiction of the Colorado Supreme Court. The reason the wells are shut down is because of a court decree in the state of Colorado. If you have a new state with new water law, in terms of that, it allows for those wells to be turned back on. Now, we're still going to, I know what she's going to say, we're still going to honor the prior appropriation doctrine. It started here in Weld County, okay? This is where it started. And we're not going to injure senior or junior water right holders, but I believe we came up with a common sense solution last year on how to have some of those wells turned back on. And that's where we would go.
With regard to, just a moment, sir. We're not going to take questions from the crowd. Let's answer there was another question about who determines tax rates. Now, your local property taxes, the mill levies, are set by the Board of County Commissioners, and your municipalities and your library districts and all those special districts, your state income tax, fees, all those are coming out of the state. Well, your local fees come from the county, but so many of those things do come from the state. So that's to answer the question on who sets tax rates. It's the jurisdiction over which, with the jurisdiction that has the authority over whatever they're taxing. So there's that answer. So it's depending on what you're talking about, it could be any one of those levels. Anything else, sir?
That's good.
All right. Anyone else in the public wishing to come forward to speak? The floor is yours. Going once. All right. I didn't have to do the going once.
She's got her notes down.
Yeah, be careful. If you let me go going once, going twice, gone, I'm gonna go put my kids to bed. So, or have dinner with them. So, welcome, man.
I'm gonna go set my water.
I'm going to Hudson.
Diana Evans, rural Fort Lupton. Been up here 30 years, but I'm a Benton County kid. And I've seen firsthand what can happen with the water. But I want to go with the questions first. Okay, first one shouldn't be a question. It should be a statement. there is a disconnect. The second one concerns me about election because I have seen how the electorate is manipulated. I don't have as much confidence in our voters anymore as I used to because I think they vote with emotions. What's going on around these different cities with the fracking and the counties, and they get a hold of one little word and they don't understand what they're talking about, but it's a no. Okay. The anything done is I think we should push our clout around because we have the Weld. And I'm sure that there are ways that 51st state banners out everywhere and scare people. I don't know. I don't know, but that doesn't mean you can't get boisterous about it because we are all upset. And, you know, you gave a prime example. That reservoir you're talking about, those reservoirs, well, have they quadrupled in price or something since it's all I mean, it's a no-brainer, but these things keep happening to us. And when I say I worry about the election, I have seen the people that move into our area, we're getting more acreages. And it's like they came to the country to isolate themselves. You go over to introduce yourself as I'm your neighbor, you know, here's our numbers. And I used to take a loaf of banana bread. I don't take anything anymore. Why should I bother? Because these people give you a blank look like, what are you doing here? This is my business. I've always said I have a lot of neighbors. Barb's a neighbor. She may live 8 miles away, but she's a neighbor. And these people that are coming now seem to want to disconnect. And I think it's a very good time for us to try to put the emphasis back on the rural, agricultural, the values that form this country. And that's what concerns me. We've seen it probably 15 years or so it's been evolving. And we were all too polite.
Very well stated there. Any comments?
Well said.
All right, well, someone's getting ready to come on up. Oh, we have somebody coming up? Welcome, come on. Happy to have you, sir.
My name is Tom Gilley. I'm from Greeley. I'm a native Coloradoan. My grandfather homesteaded in Pueblo County in 1919. And so, and our roots have been in agriculture. Our family doesn't farm anymore, but I'm in the ag business. And so, and we're all rural citizens. And we all got the same issues. And so it's like the lady just said, there is a disconnect. And some people say, well, we got to do a better job educating. Well, we've been doing that for all my life, and they still don't understand. And so the only way, in my opinion, that you're going to get a chip in the game and raise the level of agricultural awareness in Denver, much less Washington, they can't pass a farm bill, is to threaten a 51st state. And as citizens of the rural Weld County and of rural Colorado, they have the right, and you need to give them the right to vote on this issue. They may vote it down. If that's their wishes, that is fine. But at least give people a chance in the ballot box to express their opinion. That's democracy at its finest, and it needs to happen here. I commend you for giving us this forum to express our opinions, because it's very important as rural citizens that we unite behind the issues that face us, because we're not going to get any credit or any ear in Denver or Washington unless we're united in what we do. So thank you very much for what you're doing. I'm 100% behind it. Get it on the ballot.
Thank you, sir. Any comments? All right. Anyone else? Well, come on up.
No. More than anybody.
All right. Well, I'm Scott Genther, and I won't name the part of Colorado that I landed in temporarily while we're renting to look for a house to live here.
Here in Weld County, looking for a house.
No, it's in Fort Collins. I didn't know.
But you're looking in Weld.
Pardon me?
But you are looking in Weld, right?
We are looking in Weld County, yes.
Okay, there you go.
And support the commissioners strongly for their actions. I want to take a minute to not only describe the disconnect, as I'm here listening to everybody, that you feel with Denver, but to analogize it to the disconnect that I felt with Annapolis, living in Maryland. It's almost the exact same thing, except for Annapolis is much further down the road than I think where you guys are here, and it's the big reason that drove me out of Maryland, which is a great state as far as, I like the state, I liked where I lived, but the culture of the state is being changed by this other entity, by Annapolis, and I think that's what a lot of people feel in Colorado about Denver. So not only is there a disconnect, I think, between Denver and the people of Colorado and the people of Maryland and Annapolis, but it's a disconnect between the state of Colorado and what really is the problem is Washington, because we live right next to Washington, and those people feel that they know better how to run your lives, and it's sort of an elite group of people that are different. I mean, they're a different culture than Maryland is, and I think a lot of the really nice people that I met in Colorado are. So look at the disconnect. A couple of you talked about it. It's a national idea, and I want to commend the board because this really is a national idea. What you're really stating is, should anything be done, the thing that should be done is to establish the natural right to free association. That Denver really doesn't have a right to own or colonize the rural areas of Colorado, just like Washington doesn't have the right to colonize the rural areas in the states. So our country is founded, was built so that this wouldn't happen. And I think a lot of what I hear in the press and a lot of what people feel a little bit anxious about doing is they say, well, geez, this seems sort of revolutionary. What are these guys doing? What is this? We're going to form a 51st state. I don't want that. I'm a Coloradan. I've been here since 1918 or however long. Even if you've only been here 15 years, you like the state, you like the culture of the state. You want to stay part of that. Well, if at some point, I don't know if the commissioners could come up with a list of maybe how many other counties in the state are showing interest in this initiative. And if it does get to 30 counties or 40 counties or more, wouldn't it at some point you have the natural right to claim to say, you know what, we're the cultural base of Colorado, and why wouldn't the 51st state be the 51st state of Denver? Why shouldn't the malignant entity? I mean, what more accurately reflects the culture of Colorado? I mean, the people of Weld and the surrounding counties that wrap around the rural areas, or is it, the 6 major counties? They're more highly populated, and so they think that by that they have the right to your resources, to your water rights, your mineral rights, your land rights. Well, they don't. The whole point of our system being drawn up the way it was that we had a Senate, and this goes to the Phillips County idea, that was represented by state. So there was a body in your legislative branch that was represented, that would represent the rural areas. Why does Wyoming have 2 senators and California has 2 senators? Wyoming has the population of, under 1 million people. So if that's true, this is what we were founded as. This idea isn't a revolutionary idea. I believe this is a restoration to what we were founded as in the beginning. And again, commend the commissioners for establishing or even reaching the idea of you have the right to free association. You don't have to be tyrannized by a majority in Denver or in Washington. So with that being said, an idea, you've kind of already, the idea of statehood doesn't solve some of the underlying major problems. A lot of the problems in Denver come from the federal EPA. They come from federal gun legislation. They come from pressure from federal groups that pressure your state legislatures to do things that seemingly don't make any sense. You're like, why are you doing this? Why would the representative from Fort Collins vote to put this onerous regulation on energy producers in rural Colorado if she doesn't even know, or she or he, I'm sorry, I don't remember. Okay, she doesn't even know that it's there and what effect it would have on these communities, or the fact that it's a violation of equal protection guarantees in your state constitution, which is another way I think you should pursue having that particular regulation thwarted. The idea would be that your state has a right to nullify these extra constitutional measures and regulations. So that would be my idea. You keep the idea of nullification alive. I don't know why the people who, and it's not a popular subject and I'm not a fan of it, but Denver, through a constitutional proposition, legalized marijuana. which is a federally banned controlled substance. Okay, so think of it, and forget about the marijuana for a second, but think of it, a state said the federal government doesn't have the authority to have made marijuana an illegal substance. They don't have authority granted to them anywhere in the Constitution to do that. So the state said, I don't care what the federal government says. In the state of Colorado, we've determined through a legal constitutional process that we're not going to enforce that law. You have the same ability through these other laws. So think of it, forget marijuana. And again, I'm not an advocate of it, but the concept that establishes the principle. So if there's an onerous, you're not building levees out here and extra reservoirs because of stupid federal regulation. A lot of your gun regulation that you're unhappy with is pursuant to or being pressured from federal legislation that they want the states to implement. So it grants Denver extra money or things like that. Okay, I'll wrap it up. So the idea of nullification, use that concept that is there, and it's meant for all people to have. You don't have to be subservient to elite tyrannical majorities in rural areas.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Any comments?
He's right.
Thanks. The floor is yours. If anyone doesn't get up right away, I'm going to call on Commissioner Kirkmeyer, who, again, we thank very much for representing all of us so well. And no, we'll open it back up to the public. Maybe your comments will generate some discussion. But we each gave a small opening about how we ended up in this place. Maybe if you have anything you'd like to say.
Sure. All right.
Uh-oh, big mic's coming in.
So, good evening. I'm Barbara Kirkmeyer, Weld County Commissioner, and I'm actually the County Commissioner from District 3, which Fort Lupton is within District 3, and I see many folks here in the audience that I know, so I'm so glad you're here. A little bit on my background, because it sounds like everybody kind of gave some background here. I really appreciate the comments that folks said about Colorado and about how much you feel about Colorado. I mean, our hearts are in Colorado. I'm a fourth generation Coloradoan. I live about 10 miles just west of here. Grew up in Jefferson County on a dairy farm. I have 2 grandchildren who live at the old Wattenberg farm. They're the 6th generation. And in fact, I'm a 4th generation Weld County. My great-grandmother was born and raised here in this county. So it means a lot to us. And we didn't come upon this decision about having this discussion about a 51st state it wasn't lightly. We thought about it, and we heard from a lot of folks. And for me, it started, over the last 2 or 3 years, just that frustration that kept building. But last year, I think the frustration just really came to a point, and it had to do with the drought. Weld County is the largest agricultural producing county in the state of Colorado. 1/4 of the agricultural production for the state of Colorado right here in this county. Last year, the Weld County Commissioners declared a drought. We asked the governor to declare a drought. We heard about the water and the pumping and the wells. Several folks are aware of what happened, with the wells being shut off. We know that the wells got shut off. In the last few years, our groundwater has come up to where now we have basements that are flooding and crop that are dying in the field. So we declare a drought. We ask our governor to declare a drought with us and allow us to turn those wells on, because we're like, you know what, that groundwater table is up. We know it is. I mean, this is common sense. This is coming from folks who farm the land for generations. We know it. You're allowing wells to be drilled downriver. How about we let the wells here be turned on so that we keep the crops in the field growing? And we asked him, what's the difference between allowing these wells to pump from this underground reservoir here for a drought, which is a statewide emergency, versus taking the water out of a high mountain reservoir, the same water, to put out a fire? And he couldn't answer that question. And the Attorney General couldn't answer that question, but he did tell us no, he wouldn't declare a drought and wouldn't allow us to turn on the water wells. That's when I think the disconnect for me really started coming to a point. I think our agriculture community felt that it was coming to a point as well. They clearly didn't understand the importance of agriculture in this county, the importance of agriculture in the state of Colorado, and they wouldn't turn the wells on. I just think that's ridiculous and lacked common sense, and definitely showed a disconnect. As a county commissioner, I was a county commissioner from 1993 through 2000. got reelected and took office again in 2009, so I've been a county commissioner again for now. I'm on my second tour for about the last 4.5 years. There are a lot of mandates that come out. And this last year, with all the firearm stuff, and folks are like, they want to tout this as a Republican versus Democrat deal. It's not. I just heard from Carl Miller, who used to be a Lake County commissioner, who was a state representative, who talked about the disconnect between urban and rural. The whole firearm legislation to me is a disconnect between urban and rural. And they just kept building it up. And we set, and I know y'all know, we passed resolutions with regard to the Second Amendment and how we felt about the firearms legislation that was being passed. There are 55 of the 62 elected sheriffs who are challenging those laws constitutionally. But I will tell you, in our own chambers, we had folks who came to us, and we received a lot of emails, not just from you, but from a lot of folks who wanted us to do something. They thought we could void out the state laws. They were holding the Board of County Commissioners in Weld County, at least our citizens were, accountable for what was going on down in Denver. Again, I think there's a huge disconnect. The number of mandates that we receive. You talked about emissions. Well, how about nutrient levels? How about drainage regulations, floodplain regulations? I talked about the drought. Many of you know how I got started running for county commissioner. It's because more than 40% of the trash, and I mean trash, from the Denver metro area comes to our county. And we get more regulations, and they're trash. There's a disconnect. They take advantage of rural Colorado. We talked about oil and gas? Yes. You heard Commissioner Rademacher say that we are supportive of the oil and gas industry. It is a huge industry in the state of Colorado, and it is a huge industry for Weld County. We do so, though, in a very responsible manner. This board supported disclosure rules on the fracking fluid. This board supported groundwater monitoring. We put in place our own groundwater monitoring for anyone who has a well in Weld County, and we'll do it for free. We supported Rule 318 revisions to it, which require waste handling plans for the oil and gas operators. We supported them putting those catalytic converters on their wells and supported them cleaning up the air. And they did it. They're very responsible. Are they perfect? No. Is the agricultural industry perfect? No. The same complaints that the oil and gas industry has received, I'm telling you, as a dairy farmer in this county for 15 years, and I still own farms, we get those complaints. Dust, noise, you're ruining my groundwater, I'm waking up in the morning because you're having planes fly over and putting stuff all over us. I mean, think about the complaints we get. So it's the same complaints that the oil and gas industry gets. I got asked last week, am I afraid of where I live? And I live, as I told you, about 10, 12 miles directly west of here. And I have oil and gas wells all around me. In fact, one of them is named the Barbara Jean Kirkmeyer oil and gas well because that's what I did. I'm going to go take a picture of it. Am I afraid where I live? No. No. Do I think hydraulic fracturing, which has been around for over 60 years, is contaminating our groundwater? No. Not only do I not think it is, I know it's not because, you know what, the EPA says it's not.
And just recently, the Department of Energy.
And the Department of Energy says it's not. And our own Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission says it's not. So I'm willing to believe them. And I've lived in this area now for over 30 years. My water comes from the Laramie Fox Hill Aquifer, and I'm surrounded by oil and gas wells, thinking I'm okay. So the other thing is, so we believe there's an attack on oil and gas. We believe there, at least I do, I believe there's an attack on agriculture. I don't think those folks who are making laws down in Denver understand any of it. I think the attack on oil and gas is also an attack on our property rights. We've got legislators who want to put in huge setback rules, and you heard the gentleman get up earlier and ask me the question about who has which right. We have to accommodate their right under the ground. And so if the legislators who don't know anything really about oil and gas want to pass a law that requires a 1,000-foot setback or a 2,000-foot setback, that is taking my property. That's my property on the surface. That's not affecting the oil and gas industry. That is now taking my property as a surface owner. I think that's a huge disconnect. And to put it in perspective for you, in Weld County, last year there was 1,822 well permits drawn. And we have worked very diligently to work with the oil and gas industry and the agricultural industry and the home building industry to make sure that everybody can get along and coexist. In Boulder County, 22 permits. In Larimer County, 11. These are the legislators that want to pass rules and regulations and laws for us. They don't get it. They don't understand it. They want to pass rules and regulations. Commissioner Rademacher and some of the others talked about the oil and gas and the importance of it to our School Finance Act. Here's what goes on in Weld County, because we speak with our school district quite regularly and try and work with them on road projects quite regularly. And we were out at Southeast Weld Central, and they have an issue with the road out there, and Commissioner Conway and I are out there talking to them, and I'm like, why don't you use the revenues that you're getting, because the assessed value is going up in Weld County. When the assessed value goes up because of oil and gas in this county, their public school finance funding goes down. It's a whammy. It's like a double whammy to them. So we're doing really well here with oil and gas, and their finance per pupil funding goes down. That's the way the School Finance Act works. Do you think they're going to change that at the Capitol? I don't think so. And to me, the final straw here really was, and it's been said several times, I'm sure, was Senate Bill 252, where they required the additional percentage on the renewables for rural Colorado. And the legislator who carried that bill exempted himself out because he lives in El Paso County and Colorado Springs, and municipal utilities were exempted out. I think that's atrocious. So we talk about changing elections and changing legislators. Believe me, we're all elected. We go vote. I'm pretty sure most people in this room probably go vote. The folks in our area are fine. I don't get to vote for the ones in those other areas. So I think there are some things that need to be done. I think it was probably discussed that the 51st state is an idea, and yes, I think we should move forward with it because I think it raises the discussion, raises that level of discussion, and gets those points out. And that's the only way we're going to get it done, is to be boisterous. I'm looking for the woman who said that. You're exactly right. We need to continue doing that. Is it a long shot? Sure. But you know what? My grandparents were pioneers. My great-grandparents were pioneers. I'm all for being a pioneer and at least giving it a shot. And I think the other idea with regard to looking at the equality with regard to the representation at the state capitol is another good idea that came forward from Phillips County, and I'm willing to pursue it as well. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
So did that get your juices pumping? To want to say, oh, look at that, there's somebody, welcome.
Howdy guys, Jeffrey Hare from Greeley, and I'm going to give some folks a little bit of background on what's happening in social media related to the 51st State Initiative. For those that aren't familiar, I started the 51st Initiative Facebook and website just shortly after the announcement happened, and for the record, we will be launching a 501c4 to support and give voice to the 51st State Initiative going forward. Just to give you some feel for, I follow every comment and every post that's happened since the beginning of this idea has been launched. Last night we just passed 10,000 people following our page, 10,000 likes following the 51st State Initiative, and I think it's fair to say that 98% of the people commenting on that, the Facebook page, are in support. We do have a few people, of course, that are pause for concern, that are bringing up some issues. So it's difficult to say if that's an accurate number, but that would be my guess. You guys haven't brought up history in the state of Colorado on this topic, and just briefly, I think that the history of Broomfield City, who used to be located in 3 counties, and went through a petition at the statewide ballot to be able to come and create its own county, which formed in 1998, I think forms a historical basis for what you're attempting to do. They asked for the right to represent themselves. They asked for a restructuring of a political entity, and by and large, if I remember correctly, the vote was about 70% of the state. So a lot of people ask why can't it be done? And in my mind, there will be as much support from those in Denver that would frankly just rather not want anything to do with us in rural Colorado. as there will be of us in rural Colorado that would rather have our own right to self-governance. So I think if and when we get to the point, I would say when we get to the point where we can give it a statewide ballot, whether it's with the legislature referring it to a statewide ballot or through a citizens initiative, I feel confident that this will prevail with a fairly large majority at the state level. The interesting thing about some of the comments from the people outside of these counties has been in Southeast County, some of the, you mentioned Baca and Prowers, the Western Slope, I mean, in other parts of rural Colorado, by and large, they're saying, don't leave us behind. So my encouragement to you as commissioners and for the folks in this room is to continue to engage people in other parts of the state. It is partially, I'd say it's predominantly a rural versus urban issue, but there are people living in some urban areas in the state that feel that Denver's not representing their values, that the Denver-Boulder corridor, if you will, represent their values as well. So I think we owe it to people to, outside of these core 10, which now is really 11 counties with Elbert County seriously considering, I think we owe it to hopefully give those people a voice too. The comment I've heard on the Phillips County proposal, which I think is a great proposal to consider, is the only downside to that, which you guys have probably considered, is it doesn't right the wrongs that have been happening. All the things you talked about, the wells being shut off, the SB 252, the gun control legislation, it puts us in a better position to have a rural Colorado a voice going forward, but it doesn't help us to have a fresh start and do things right, or to go back to restore, if you want to call it, the people that have lived here in the state for generations, to restore the state to what it was before the progressive agenda, especially through this last legislative session, was forced upon the rest of Colorado. So those are my comments. That's my idea, is to continue the dialogue, continue to reach out to as many county commissioners throughout the rest of the state and continue the dialogue. Certainly there is a disconnect. You guys should do things, and we certainly should, as a voice of Weld County, have the opportunity to give our opinion on this in this fall's ballot.
Mr. Hare, I want to say something to give voice to the comment regarding people that are not just in rural Colorado have concerns. I went out to a children's birthday party down in Parker, Colorado, and it was a group of prosecutors, a group of cops, and you know, urban folks. And
some children.
And there were a couple of children there. Let them play outside. And so, yeah, that's right. So anyway, Mr. Hare, we're out there, and of course this topic came up because it was the big story in the paper, and I was getting a lot of good-natured ribbing about, yeah, what are you guys up in Weld County doing, and all that sort of thing. And I took it for a while, and I asked them, kind of this, do you think there's a disconnect? No, there's not a disconnect. You guys are just whatever, shooting off or something. And then I just said, yeah, you're right. And I'm looking at a prosecutor from the 18th Judicial District, and I said, Nathan Dunlap. And he said, and that set the whole room off. Upset about what happened. That's when the governor took a guy on death row and said, you know what, we're not going to proceed with the will of the people of Colorado after a jury has heard this grisly case that happened so long ago. I was in law school when this guy was prosecuted. This thing's been around for so long, and all I had to do was say that, and Parker, Colorado, a room full of folks said, wow, you're right. There's a disconnect between Denver and Parker. Any other comments?
I would just like to reaffirm what you have said. We've obviously gotten a lot of emails and phone calls since this idea was rolled out. What has shocked me, and quite frankly, pleasantly surprised me, is most of the emails I've received, most of the phone calls I received, haven't been from residents in the 10 counties. It's been from the metropolitan area. And there are a number of folks who identify with what's going on. and you're right, Commissioner, it's not just one issue. It's not Senate Bill 252 or the Second Amendment issues or Nathan Dunlap. There are a whole bunch of issues that folks in the 7 metro counties are just as upset about as we are. And I think that's what this dialogue does. It brings those folks, just like you did in Parker, Colorado, to create that bridge, to bring those concerns together so we begin that dialogue. So I just want to reaffirm what you said. From what I have witnessed over the last few weeks as we have discussed this, my phone calls, my emails, my personal conversations with people, there are a lot of folks in the metro area that identify with this cause and quite frankly are very encouraging. You guys keep it up. Go for it. This discussion needs to happen.
Thank you, sir. The floor is yours. Anyone else wishing to give public comment? This is your chance. Going once? Going twice? Now see, she got up, and when I see movement, I'm like, you're gonna speak. Okay, last chance. Okay, Commissioner Conway, we haven't heard from you.
I have a question. Can we take, I know there are a lot of people that don't feel comfortable sometimes standing up in public and speaking, and I can appreciate that. But I think in terms of the questions, can we just take a basic poll, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Please.
First of all, let's ask question number one. Is there, what do people feel? Is there a disconnect? How many people feel yes? Please raise your hand. Okay. How many people do not feel there's a disconnect? Wow. Should anything be done about this disconnect? How many people think we should do something? Okay, thank you. How many people think we shouldn't do anything? Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Thank you for being, for being
Bravery.
That's great. No, we need this input. We need this input. How many of you want to see the Board of County Commissioners put the statehood initiative on this fall's ballot to let the people vote on it? All right. How many people think you do not want the Board of County Commissioners to put it on the ballot? Thank you. Oh, hold this up. Yeah, yes.
Actually came here thinking I was going to get information.
Yes.
And I think before you put it on the ballot, I think people have to be informed as to what it means. That's right. No, I don't think anybody's informed. I don't know what it means to do that. What happens to my taxes, the water, the roads, the land? The land, yes.
What area, how many counties are left?
Well, we're in that discussion area. I agree with you. And we are attempting.
That's fair.
And that's fair. And we're going to try. We have talked about that amongst ourselves. And you're going to be seeing a series of articles that will be authored by the commissioners and others to talk about those very specific issues. I'm pleased to tell you that we have made arrangements through a academic institution to do an economic feasibility study on what would look at those questions about tax policy.
My guy down the road that has hay, to get water to grow hay.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, we're gonna talk about water. We're gonna talk about transportation. We talked a little bit about education, and we are going to roll out those numbers as we move forward as part of this dialogue. But I'll be honest with you. There are some questions we're never going to have enough answers to. I mean, one question leads to 6 questions, leads to 12 questions, but we're going to do the best job we can to provide information and do those things. We are working very hard to, we've had our finance and administration people do. I can tell you that the 10 counties, quite frankly, have an assessed valuation of $9 billion, which is equal to Denver's.
If I could just insert something here. There may be an assumption that we need to clear up and explain. If this matter is put on the ballot, does that mean that in November we have a new state? The answer is no. What the question that would be presented to the people that would vote would be, do you want us, your elected representatives, to go to the state and ask them to start this process This is a process that has to go through the state legislature. It has to then get on the ballot for statewide votes. And then, so that's the process. This is just the very beginning of the process. Those that have, just a moment, those that have specific questions about how that process works, that's that document I said that Commissioner Conway is passing around. So we can, well, let's make sure we get any other public comment, and we'll have, Commissioner Conway's handing those out. So anyone else with public comment, please come on up.
Maybe a little bit more of a question, but this has to go through the United States Congress as well, right?
Yes.
So the state of Colorado would have to allow us to take their land and their water.
Okay, so first of all, we need to understand.
I can't imagine that happening.
Well, so first of all, I own property in other counties, so that doesn't mean I lose my property right or I lose my property just because this state is created, if that were to happen. You still own your rights. Water is a property right as well, so whoever owns those property rights would still remain owning those property rights. Are there some compacts and some different issues that would need to be worked through? Absolutely. Would there need to be a constitutional convention? Should we get to that point? Absolutely. And then the people who would live within those boundaries would determine that kind of their constitution.
I don't want to talk pro or con, but all I wanted to do was say that people should be aware that if they're voting yes on forming a new state, that of the long process something like this would take, and water rights could be severely affected. I don't think it's something that can just be done easily. The United States Congress has to say, yes, you can have a new state.
Yes.
At this point, I can't imagine, they can't even pass a farm bill. How could,
exactly.
You know?
Touche.
So, which I think at this point is probably more important for us than some of the other things. The question for me is, do we want to spend the money and time educating people as to the long process this would take?
I think
That's what these meetings are about.
Yeah.
And I think that,
Good.
and I think that's what the election will put us in that path. Basically, we're asking, do you want us to pursue it? And if the answer is yes, that's when all these questions will come to bear. Because you're absolutely right. My water rights are very precious to me. I'm a senior water right holder.
Yeah.
And water law in Colorado is very, very complicated. I mean, that's why we have more water lawyers in this state than the rest of the nation combined. And yeah, water is a big issue.
Yeah, it is.
And so is transportation, education, everything. But all we're asking is, do you want us to pursue it? If the answer is yes, then we have a lot of homework to do. You're absolutely right. We have a lot of groundwork to do. Because this is not going to be done in 1 year, maybe not even 2. It may be 4 or 5 years down the road. It took Colorado 3 times to become a state. This won't happen overnight. And there's a lot of questions that will have to be answered. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
But we don't have them tonight because, frankly, we don't want to spend taxpayers' money at this point on something that we don't know if it's going to fly.
That was my concern, that people would know what they're voting on if you put it on a ballot, that they would know. This is a long,
Should we pursue
involved
it?
process.
Should we
What would-
pursue it?
And what would we lose?
Yeah. And those, like I said, the academic question is it feasible financially?
Right.
There's a lot of questions that would have to be.
And I wouldn't cut out Greeley. Somebody
Oh.
said cut Greeley out, it's too
No,
urban.
we're not cutting anybody out.
We have about 6 more minutes. If anybody else has public comment, welcome, sir.
Nick G. I'm outside of Elbert, or in rural Elbert County.
You'll have to probably speak up a little bit, sir. And don't talk into the mic because it really won't do you no good.
The question I got is, you're going to get a lot more support if somebody knows more about the background of what you're trying to achieve out of the 51st state. It's been real vague on everything. I'm on the Facebook thing. I'm on the website. You have to have some sort of a basis of what you're going to mimic. Are you going to mimic Wyoming and South Dakota and Texas and states like that, or are we going to do a sister state similar to Minnesota? or the current way Colorado was 10 years ago, where our taxes are still high and they're still being plundered with no reasons. I'm sure everybody here probably spends $1,000 a year on their vehicle taxes alone in their families. There's notes in our DMVs right now that they're understaffed. There's no excuse for that, none. The frivolous spending of the state of Colorado is absolutely ridiculous. State taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, vehicle taxes. By the time you license a horse trailer, a flatbed, your property taxes, and you've got your diesel truck that you're paying $900 for a 5-year-old truck, and then you have to go buy a gas truck to get around in town. It's getting ridiculous. It's not just a minor thing, and it's not just for rural. It's statewide, and people in the cities need to understand that too. I'm sure their taxes are being wasted just as much as ours are, and that needs to be brought up as well. Where are we going to go with this next state? Are we going to start over right where we're at? That would absolutely be pointless. I mean, if we're starting over to start over a new state, and we're going to do it the right way and ensure that we stay that way, that's going to get you some support. If you continue to call it just a 51st state and leave it bland, you're not going to get any support. And I'd hate to see that, because I do think it needs to happen. And I think, our governor has made it clear he doesn't like us through his actions and his statements. It needs to stop, and I think we need to put our feet down and go to a movement for a 51st state. But we need to know that we're going to do it the right way from the start. Otherwise, we're wasting everybody's time.
Very good. Commissioner Conway.
Yeah, let me try to address some of your answers. And again, we're not going to have all the answers that you're probably.
Just a foundation.
But I'm gonna, I have a good friend that says, does your walk match your walk match your talk? I think Weld County is the business model that we're talking. And let me give you what that business model is. The citizens of Weld County in 1975 created a home rule charter. They were just frustrated with you, with local government, and they made a change. They went to the ballot box and they voted to create a home rule county. And what did that home rule county say? You are not allowed to go into debt. And it took Weld County from 1976 to 1993 to pay off their bonded indebtedness. For the last 20 years, Weld County has paid everything in cash. We have no debt. Okay? The initial economic analysis that we have done in-house, but we want to have that verified from an independent source, and that's what we thought we had UNC to do it. They decided they didn't want. I think it was related to political pressure, to be honest with you. I'll be just straight honest. Because when I met with the deans, they were very excited about the process. And then all of a sudden, we got a letter that we don't want to do the cert. But I have an academic institution that we're going to announce next week after we have a meeting with that institution. And what it's going to do is it's going to study what is the successful business model that Weld County has had since 1976 that has allowed Weld County, you might not know this, to be the only county in the country with no debt and no sales tax. What has allowed that business model? And that's what we're going to base this off of. This new state is just, we're not creating a new state just to create a new state. We believe in some fundamental principles that this board votes on and upholds every single day that our fellow county commissioners out east, quite frankly, support.
And we used to have that as a country. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we had it as a country, and we're trading that away for horseshit hoopla. And that needs to stop, and we need to know if we're going to go forward and put the effort and the money and the time into building the 51st state, we need to know that it's going to be a solid foundation, that we're not willing to give up our freedoms and our rights for somebody else's benefit.
I don't think any of us are pursuing this for the exercise of the political exercise to create a state.
Well, I hope not, but it's not being advertised that you're not. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
You're leaving it bland.
What you're saying is absolutely spot on. If this is just going to be a movement to create a new state, what's the reason of creating a new state? We have to define, and you're absolutely right, and that's what we're here to listen to tonight. But what the things that are driving this are the incessant debt. what we're doing to our children and our grandchildren.
Then why isn't it on that list?
Because we're asking you to know.
But
So what I would ask you, what would you like to see in that 51st state? What would you, if we go through the exercise of getting this on the ballot and go through the process, which everybody knows, and you have the paper in front of you, is a huge task. What do you want to see as a citizen in that new state? What would make you, I think I have an idea, but I want to hear from you.
an honest state with elected officials that actually care about the people who they're elected to run. You can't, the way things are going right now is absolutely absurd in both the state and federal levels, and a lot of the county levels as well. And there's too many people with their own prerogatives and their own desires that they're running their thoughts and their votes with, and that needs to stop. And not all of us, I work in the oil field, so it's not like I can just get up and go to every single meeting or go vote or go do this and take part.
We appreciate you taking time tonight.
Hey, you bet. They need to do, I guess what I'm trying to say is they need to work more with the public. There's not enough trust between the government officials and the people who are paying their paychecks. And that needs to stop, and we need to know from the start that when we're going to try to start a new state, we need to know the foundation of what it's based on, its principles, and goals as to where it's going to go.
Okay, those are great comments.
Because as you're right, the worst statement you can make is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
That's right.
I think those are very good comments. Thank you for taking time away and giving us, that's excellent food for thought.
All right. There being no further public comments, I'll bring it back to, there being no,
Oh, no.
Okay. Come on up.
I'm here to film. I'm not supposed to say anything. I've been trying to keep quiet and I can't. I have to take exception with what you just said, sir.
Can I have a name?
My name is
and-
Scott Slidister. I live in Fort Collins. I know I shouldn't be saying anything, but I'm going to. Your statement that, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help is the worst thing you've ever said. That is evidence that all you need of number one. Because as an urbanite, no, that's not true. Government comes and helps us all the damn time. But rural folks don't see that. They don't see, now there's a huge disconnect on both sides. You guys have been bashing the urban, in a few hours after 7 News is done, we'll be bashing rural. And that's just the way it is. I'm from Illinois. I'm from downstate Illinois. We've been dealing with the embarrassment that is Chicago forever. And if you think Denver's bad, wake up. Now, what I'm saying here is I'm actually came here completely, tried to be neutral. I didn't know if I supported you. I didn't know if I wanted to work against you. I actually do support most of you. Most of what you're trying to do because I am from downstate, and I completely empathize. I can remember so many times listening to Springfield fight back and forth about what is Chicago going to do and what is the downstate going to do and how much money is being bled out of the rural Illinois up to take care of that mess up there. It's the same damn thing here. Except the difference is the cause, the catalyst. The catalysts are different. There it's all union related. Here it's guns and oil. And
agriculture.
And agriculture. But it's, if it's truly agriculture, then you'd be in favor of 64, but that's another conversation. But
I'm really tired.
Hemp uses almost no water. But
Okay.
This
This gentleman has the floor.
What I'm seeing here, though, is that, and I hope my answer to 3 is yes. Let the people speak.
Yeah.
Vote yes, vote no. It doesn't matter. Let them speak. Should anything we've done? Maybe, but it definitely needs to be education on both sides.
Agree.
Because I hear the statement said, "I'm from the government," and that's the worst thing you can ever hear. No, that may be the true for rural folks, but it certainly is not true for urban.
Okay, can I answer?
Thank you for those comments. Oh, we have a question, sir.
Sir, can I ask you a question? Because this will be helpful to us. You're from Fort Collins.
Yes, I am.
You came here kind of neutral tonight.
I tried to, yes.
Help us understand, because we do try. We do have conversations, as we have talked about. and engage in the political process. Give us some suggestions on how we could be more effective in communicating to folks like yourself and your neighbors who maybe have a different perspective on this, and I appreciate that and respect that. But how do we bridge that gap?
It probably isn't an easy way to do it. But one of the best suggestions I could have is look to some of the eastern states and get the capital out of Denver.
Okay.
Because if the capital of Illinois was Chicago, Illinois would be screwed. And they're even more than they are.
Even more than that. That's a good point.
I don't think you really can.
Well, no, but how do we begin a dialogue with your neighbors that you interact with every day? We recognize, I think you answered number one. Is there a disconnect there?
Oh.
Seems to be a disconnect, correct?
1,000 times wider than the Grand Canyon.
Okay, so how do we build that bridge?
First by doing islands. Put an island, series of islands across, because the only way to get across is island hop. There is no way to put a bridge all the way across.
Okay.
There's just not. We don't. Forget about the country. Just look at the eastern slope. Just look. You guys were calling it the Boulder-Denver corridor as a joke. Well, it is a joke because it's actually the Cheyenne to Pueblo corridor.
Or Santa Fe.
Or Santa Fe. It's, from all the maps I'm seeing on Google about all the counties that are interested, it's a big old horseshoe. We want to carve the state up into a big old horseshoe. Well, Weld County is going to have zero power when it's done because it's all going to go to the springs. And
that's assuming we're going to let them in.
They're not in the horseshoe.
They're not in the horseshoe.
they're part of the colored map I see. Yeah. So that's where I'm basing that.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
But it's just, how do we do the disconnect? I don't know. But maybe both sides need to stop with the assumptions. Both needs, gentleman back here, I didn't know anything what you said. You made a statement that everybody knows it costs thousands of dollars to register your car at the DMV. It cost me $50. I got one car.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wrong. No.
Okay, just a moment. Sir, just a moment. You are speaking to the Board of County Commissioners, so please talk to us.
I'm speaking to the people, and that's who I'm talking to.
That's okay. You're fine. Go ahead.
So, there is a huge disconnect. I didn't know the farm folks spent $20,000 a year at the DMV because I live in town, and I've lived in town my whole life. Now, when I was little, I lived in a town of 3,000, and I spent 20 years in a town of 3,000 on the Illinois River. I find it very humorous to hear somebody who lives in Greeley refer to Greeley as rural. That's humorous to me because Greeley has got 100,000 people in it. That ain't rural anymore. And it's just, both sides need to wake up and realize that their perspective is not the reality. It's their reality for them, but it's not the true reality. It's that there's my opinion, there's your opinion, and there's the truth. And it always lies in the middle. There's red, there's blue, and there's purple. And if you look at our money, it says that purple has got the strength.
Okay, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, thank you. This has been a wonderful opportunity for us to speak with you all. Oh, Commissioner Kirkmeyer, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Discover Weld website as you, and I'll pass these
out these cards real quick. You want to help? Weld County has started a new program. We really are trying to boost the appeal of Weld County and marketing of Weld County. So if you notice on these cards, we have introduced a new website called Discover Weld. And we think Weld County is a great place to live, work, and play. And then on the back, there's a smart code, so you can click onto that and take you directly to the website. And we would invite you all to go to our website and look what's going on in Weld County and participate and engage in some of the local festivals and things that are going on throughout Weld County and find out more about Weld County. So I just want to hear that. Thanks.
Sure. All right.
Sure.
Thank you very much for coming and spending
Thank you again for taking time away.
Yes.
Thank you.